Today, we're diving into the Seattle apartment market because something's shifting right under the surface. It's a change that's quietly rewriting the rules between renters and landlords, and it's creating a whole new set of opportunities and challenges for pretty much everyone. So here's the big question we're tackling today. You probably look at your rent check and think, "Yup, the market is as strong as ever." But if you're out there trying to find a new place, you might be seeing a totally different story. Underneath it all, the power dynamics are doing a complete 180. Let's dig into why that is. To really get what's happening right now, we've got to rewind a bit because for the last several years, renting in Seattle it was a pretty one-sided game, all about fierce competition and not a lot of choices for renters. I mean, think back just a year or two. Remember that feeling? The frantic online searches, the weekend open houses with the lines stretching down the block. Renters had basically zero leverage. You found a place you could tolerate, you signed that lease as fast as you could, and you paid whatever they asked because you knew 10 other people were ready to take it if you didn't. So that was the world we were living in. Buildings just like this were always full, and the idea of, negotiating your rent or asking for some kind of a deal, almost laughable. The whole market was built on scarcity, and that scarcity gave landlords all the power. But, and this is the key, the things that created that scarcity are starting to go in the other direction. So what's the big change? Honestly, it all comes down to one thing, a flood of new apartments. And when I say a flood, I mean a truly historic wave of new construction that is completely changing the math for the entire region. All over the Seattle area, these huge projects that have been just cranes in the sky for years are finally opening their doors. We're not talking about a little trickle of new units here and there. We are talking about a massive historic number of new apartments hitting the market all at once. And what's just wild is the sheer speed and scale of it. One analyst put it perfectly. For years, new housing supply was just this slow, steady drip. But now it's like someone cranked open a fire hose. And that is really the heart of it. The massive scale of all this new supply is the number one thing tipping the scales. It's injecting a huge amount of choice back into a market that has been starved for it for a very, very long time. Okay, so what does this massive flood of new apartments actually do to the market? Well, it flips that classic supply and demand story, the one that has defined the city for years, completely on its head. For as long as most of us can remember, the story was simple. There were way more people looking for apartments than there were apartments available. Now that script has totally flipped. The supply of new places to live is finally catching up to, and in some spots, even getting ahead of the demand from new renters. This chart really paints the picture of what we're talking about. For years, the number of new apartments opening was pretty consistent, predictable. That's that short bar. But lately, we've seen this gigantic spike in new supply, that really tall bar right next to it. That huge difference between the two, that gap is everything. It's the key to understanding this new market. Here's another way to think about it. Picture a line for new apartment openings just shooting up like a rocket. At the same time, the line for new renters is still climbing, but it's much more of a slow and steady grade. That widening space between those two lines, that's where we're living right now. It's the space where renters suddenly have options and landlords suddenly have competition. So does this mean rents are just dropping everywhere? Well, not exactly. The impact of all this new supply is actually being felt pretty unevenly. It really, really matters where you're looking and what kind of building you're looking at. It's a really common assumption. People see a bunch of shiny new luxury buildings going up and think, great, rents will go down everywhere. But the reality is a whole lot more complex than that. The effect is much more targeted. Okay, check this out. This table really breaks down the two different worlds that are popping up right now. On one hand, you've got the brand new high-end buildings. For them, the competition is intense. They have to fill hundreds of empty units, and they have to do it fast. That's why you're seeing all the 2 months free deals. They're under a ton of pressure. But then you've got the older, more established buildings. Their world is much more stable. They aren't starting from zero. For them, it's all about just keeping the great tenants they already have. The pressure they feel is totally different. So a building like this one that's been a part of the neighborhood for a while, it's just more insulated. The people living there are probably pretty settled, and the owner isn't in a panic trying to sign 200 leases before a big bank loan comes due. They feel the market shift, for sure, but for them, it's more like a gentle breeze, not a hurricane. All right, we've covered the what and the why. Now let's get to the most important part. What does all this rebalancing actually mean for you? Let's break down the new rules of the game, whether you're a renter, an owner, or an investor. For renters, this is an absolute game changer. You have more power to negotiate than you've had in years, especially if you're looking at one of those newer buildings. Seriously, don't be shy about asking for a better deal or a month or two of free rent. But most importantly, you can breathe. Take your time. That pressure to sign a lease on the spot, it's gone. You can actually shop around and make the best choice for you. Now, for property owners, the game has totally changed. It's not about managing a waitlist anymore. It's about actively competing for good tenants. Keeping your current residents happy, that's priority number one, because finding a new tenant is way more expensive than keeping a good one. This means you're going to see a lot more focus on customer service, on marketing, and on smart incentives to keep people around. And for investors, the writing's on the wall. The days of just buying any old building and watching the rent checks automatically grow by double digits, well, those days are on pause. To win in this new environment, you've got to be smarter. It means really understanding which specific neighborhoods and which kinds of buildings are in the best position to ride out this rebalancing period. So after all of that, if you remember just one thing from our conversation today, what should it be? Let's boil it all down. It is so easy to see more vacancies and deals and think, oh no, the market is in trouble. But that's not what's happening. This is actually what a healthy market is supposed to do. After years of being stretched to its absolute limit, supply is finally catching up. This isn't a collapse, it's a rebalancing. And that brings us to the most practical piece of advice. For renters, patience means you can take your time to find the right place and the right deal. For owners, it means being patient to find high-quality tenants instead of just panicking to fill a unit. The frantic hurry decisions that defined the last few years, that's no longer the winning play. And we'll leave you with this to think about. As this rebalancing keeps playing out, who do you think is going to come out on top? Will it be the renters who suddenly have all this choice? The owners of those brand new buildings who are fighting for every tenant? Or maybe the investors who were smart enough to bet on older, more stable properties? The answer is going to shape the future of Seattle's housing market, and it might just shape your next move too.